Community Advisory Committee meeting to order. Procedural notes, this meeting is being held electronically as per section 19 of the town's procedural bylaw number 6228-19 as amended due to COVID-19 situation. Number 2 on the agenda, approval of the minutes. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated by Legislative Services? Moved by Sarah, seconded by
I'll second.
Laura.
Sure.
Any questions or comments on the agenda? I call a vote. All in favor? Okay. Is anyone opposed? Perfect. Number 3, declaration of pecuniary interest in general nature therefore of. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I'm saying that wrong. I'm sorry. Okay. Number 4, receipt of the minutes. May I please have a motion to receive the minutes meetings of September 17, 2020? Moved by Sarah, seconded by Councillor Kim. Any questions or comments on the minutes?
No.
I call vote. All in favor? Is anyone opposed? Perfect. So number 6, matters of consideration. Let's start with the CAC 20-007 Town of Aurora Community Energy Plan. Firstly, we will be having a presentation by Suzanne Hall, partner and project lead, LURA Consulting. And Natalie, would you like to introduce Suzanne?
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, so good evening. My name is Natalie Keel. I'm the Energy and Climate Change Analyst for the Town of Aurora. Just a very quick, brief intro to the project. The town retained LURA Consulting, ICLEI Canada, and Wood in 2019 to develop a community energy plan. The project was funded by the Ontario government and also by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We're in the final stage of the plan development, and we're seeking comments this evening on the draft plan before it goes to council in January. So I don't want to take any more of Susan's time. So I'll introduce you to Susan. Susan Hall is the partner and project lead at LURA. She'll be presenting tonight. We also have Megan Meany on the line somewhere, I believe, who is the executive director at ICLEI Canada and is here to answer any additional questions that might come up. So Susan, if you're able to share your screen.
Thanks, Natalie. Okay, just get this to full screen. Can everybody see that okay?
Looks good.
Yes. Okay, great. Thanks everyone. As Natalie said, my name's Susan, and I've been working with the town and a couple members of your committee with Barry and Councillor Gilliland on the development of this plan through our stakeholder working group. So we're really excited to have a chance to share it with you tonight. I will do my best to get through it in a very short amount of time. We've got some backup slides if people want to go into any of the strategies in detail. And as Natalie mentioned, Megan's here as well, representing her team who've been working with us on this project. So I just wanted to start at the highest level about what a community energy plan is. So it's a plan, it's a long-term strategic plan. You can see our plan goes out to 2050. It's focused on energy efficiency, reducing energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. And it is for the whole community, so town-wide, not just the sort of corporate assets of the municipality, but across the entire community. And the intent is to move towards a sustainable energy system while benefiting the environment. maintaining health and benefiting the economy. And there's a number of reasons why communities undertake a community energy planning process. It really is one of the key areas in the environmental sector, looking at climate impacts. So local climate change impacts are being felt by communities across Ontario. We are seeing things like more flooding events, more extreme weather. So it is an opportunity to look at the mitigation side of greenhouse gas emissions. And all of those impacts have costs both to homeowners and to the municipality. So it's an opportunity to think about what our energy systems are, creating resilient systems, as well as reducing the amount of emissions and amount of energy that is being used. We take into consideration a growing population. So we know for Aurora that you're slated to grow to about 70,000 by 2031, and that growth will continue beyond 2031. I understand the town's in the midst of an official plan update, so there may be some other population numbers that come out a little bit later, but up to 70,000 by 2031, and we do anticipate that that will continue to grow beyond. So we want to make sure that the town can grow, but consider the environment in its growth and the impacts to how it uses energy and what the emissions are. There are greenhouse gas emission targets that are set by the province, that are their aspirations, as well as the federal government, looking out to 2030 and to 2050. The town, like many other municipalities, declared a climate emergency in 2019, and this plan will help set a path towards achieving that climate emergency. And then we want to think about the economic benefits. So this isn't just about environment. All of the energy systems that we use cost money, and if we can reduce energy use, that will benefit homeowners and businesses within the community. So we're taking that lens as well. We developed a plan over a series of steps. So we established a stakeholder working group who have helped guide us through the whole development of this plan. We started with an energy, greenhouse gas and energy cost baseline. So that would tell us what our starting point was. And that was in 2018 based on the most recent available year of complete data. Then the team created a business's plan scenario. So what would happen if there is no action taken out to 2050? We defined targets and created strategies to address energy emissions in the community, and that's culminated in the community energy plan that you have in your package tonight. And as Natalie mentioned, those are the funding sources. So if we look at energy use by fuel type, first of all, you can see that the total amount of energy used in the community is 6.8 million gigajoules. So we use gigajoules because it's a measure we can use for both electricity and natural gas and across all fuel types. You can see that natural gas is the highest of the fuel types used, followed by electricity and gasoline, with smaller percentages from each of the other fuel types. And you can see that the associated cost to the community is 178 million, so not insignificant. From a greenhouse gas emission lens, the total emissions are 326,000 tons, which is about 5 tons per person. And if we look at the biggest sectors, buildings account for over 50%, travel's not far behind with 37, and then waste in the community is 9. And in that sort of business as planned scenario that I mentioned earlier, we took a look at what would happen with emissions if we think about that out to 2030 and we think about it out to 2050 from where we are today. You can see that the emissions stay relatively stable as a total, or just over that sort of 300,000 mark. And that's because there's population growth, but we're also anticipating things like the Ontario Building Code will have increased energy efficiency. So there's things that offset that growth. And if you look at the green line, that is the trajectory of the provincial and federal targets. So there's still quite a ways to go to bring energy and emissions down in the community. The plan has a vision that positions Aurora as a leader in energy and emission reduction with a focus on improving quality of life. And it was really important to our working group that it is in collaboration with residents, organizations, and businesses. That this isn't just one organization. It needs to have collective action across the community. And there's a series of goals. I'm not going to go into each one of those, but you can sort of see the different slices that are across this plan. We have 11 core strategies to reduce energy and emissions under these categories. So in homes, we have strategies related to existing houses and new construction, similarly for businesses. We look at recommissioning under the businesses as well. For industry, it's focused on implementation of best practices and a continuous sort of improvement lens. There are opportunities to further explore district energy systems. From the travel lens, this would be looking at increasing public transit, increasing the uptake of active transportation options, and then conversion to electric vehicles. Waste reduction, a recommendation on renewables that focuses on solar. And then those are all sort of quantified in the emissions reductions. They're underpinned by land use planning, which establishes sort of the makeup of your community. And there's also an indication that sequestration and offsets can help, but they won't be the only solution. So together, all of these strategies achieve 22% reduction by 2030 from that baseline and 65% by 2050. So there is still a gap to the 80% federal target for 2050. And if you just look at them sort of as in this wedge diagram, you can see the impact of the various strategies. So you see those transportation is that kind of purple one in the middle. That's electric vehicle adoption. It's got, it's responsible for quite a slice in there. The residential efficiency is also the top end of the wedge diagram and having quite a significant impact. So we can come back to these as well if you'd like. The plan includes a series of elements on plan implementation. So we have included a table for financing that talks about the town's investment, so the municipality investment for the near term, and really focuses on what do you need to get implementation going. It also identifies potential funding sources that the town could access. Communications and engagement have been highlighted that they're going to be needed for all of these programs and strategies throughout so that people understand them. Reporting and plan renewable, we've suggested every 5 years and have the timing aligned with the town's conservation demand management plan. So that's the town's energy plan related to town assets. Then we have a section on enabling components, and there's an appendix with all of those, but they cover 9 different categories, from capacity building to policy tools to training and technology. That are all elements that can support advancing these energy solutions in the community. We also developed a list of potential partners. So our working group helped to flesh that out. These are organizations that we believe have a similar mandate or interest. It's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there are others, but it gives the town a starting place for implementation when looking for partners. And the implementation would be led by an implementation working group through the town. The intent is really to have responsibility for implementation linked into the various departments and divisions, and that it would be coordinated through the energy manager. And then as different strategies come into play, there would be different internal and external partners that could be needed and invited to participate in that process. So there is that external lens as well. And that partnership table, as I mentioned, has a good starting point for who could be brought in as needed. So that's kind of a whirlwind tour of what's in the energy plan. We've got backup slides on the various strategies if anybody wants to talk through those, but maybe I'll stop here and see if there's any questions. Or comments. Happy to hear both.
Thank you, Suzanne. May I get a mover and a second to put the item on the floor for discussion? Laura, mover, Sarah, seconder. Okay, are there any comments or questions for Suzanne? Sarah?
Thank you so much. When I was reading the report, which I have to say was very extensive and I could not get all the way through, there was something that I noticed that has an impact in my own life. So my previous home in Aurora was built in 1964, and the biggest update that it had done was new windows. Last year, our family moved to an area that in your graphs was one of the highest energy usage areas. And we have found that our energy use has gone through the roof, disproportionate to the size of the house. And I think that that has to do with the fact that it was a house that was built in 1989. And I think that a lot of people know about the those 1980s houses that were put up very quickly with not a lot of building regulations. So one of the things that stood out to me was that there was a call for homes that were built prior to, I can't remember the year, being assessed for retrofits. And what I'm seeing is, especially when you're looking at that usage graph, that some of those homes that are very high usage are not necessarily falling within that retrofit area. Whereas I know that some of the homes that are built in 1964 are solid as a rock and very energy efficient. So I'm just wondering what the rationale is behind something like that.
Sure, it's a good question, and Megan, you're welcome to jump in as well. I think what we were looking to see where sort of the bulk of your housing stock sits in terms of the residential sector. So many of them are kind of that 1980s, which is around the sweet spot for some retrofits. It doesn't mean that houses that are newer than that can't participate, or older than that. It's really just to give an indication of, where do you have the greatest number of homes that are within that sort of standard category of candidates for retrofits. So Megan, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, and I would think like development patterns, certainly follow, if there was a big swath of homes built at that same time in your neighborhood, that's going to be a prime target for where some of your energy efficiency upgrades are going to be. And certainly any energy efficiency upgrade kind of program has to go into another level of like design. And this would be like a wonderful thing to kind of bring in to know, okay, what is the specific kind of age of housing in this neighborhood, and they're all likely going to have similar target areas because of when they were built and what the building patterns were at that time.
Maybe can I jump in then? My concern with the achievability of the plan is that it seems, quite a stretch to be able to achieve the targets. And a lot of that is dependent upon innovation, really, and real changes in the way we work and live. I just wonder, given, where we're at, how achievable you think the plan is and what's really within our locus of control to make a difference on it.
Yeah, I think we're hearing kind of similar comments at kind of every level of government, and this recognition that we have to ramp up our implementation of these plans, right? We've been talking about them for far too long, and now like the IPCC scientists are saying, I think it was 13 years to act, and now we're down to like 11. Like the clock is definitely ticking. And I think you're seeing it, like even today, the feds tabled a new target, right, with their net zero target planning. And we're going to be seeing sort of more and more kind of programming and innovation programming ramping up because of that. But you're right, like there is still a gap, right? And there's a certain kind of leap of faith that's required. And I think the more that cities like Aurora kind of take this leadership step towards, adopting these kinds of plans, and we are seeing it kind of in cities across Canada and around the world, then that sort of demonstrates the level of urgency and the need to act in this space.
I just, one other question was, do you have any sense of the impact of COVID in terms of, potentially changing people's working patterns? And if, even at one of the outcomes where people work on average 1 day a week from home at least, how much of an improvement will that be just in terms of the transportation? Offset, I'm sure, by heating and cooling.
Yeah, it's something to think about for sure. We don't know what it'll look like, post pandemic and how much there will be return to sort of prior patterns, I guess. I think the hope, though, is that some of the travel will be less. We certainly have seen, a rapid transformation of everything, how we can do meetings online and we don't have to travel to see each other face to face per se. But it would impact that travel slice for sure, I think. But the degree to which is still kind of unknown.
Yeah, I haven't seen any like specific kind of modeling out. I've certainly heard a lot of discussion about how it's going, the future is going to change in the way we all kind of work and live and play. And downtown cores and kind of downtown real estate is really kind of scrambling to think about like what their future holds if more people aren't going to be going into downtown cores to work and stuff like that. So there's certainly a lot of kind of discussion and investigation into it now. I've never seen any like realistic kind of modeling on it though.
Laura, I was just going to add to your previous question. There's a couple of things in the plan that are already kind of in the works, if you will. So the transportation, and Ankra, you can speak to this, but the transportation master plan work is already underway. There's a lens for active transportation there. The town is also looking at developing green standards for new buildings. So there's a couple of things that are sort of kind of in the quick implementation category, if you will. And then the other piece on the voluntary retrofit program is there are a number of municipalities who are advancing that fairly quickly and looking at how to sort of broaden that offering and approach. And there's certainly some in York Region in that category. So I think there's some opportunities for partnership that would help Aurora kind of accelerate some of those programs.
Sarah, you have another comment?
Yes, thank you so much. I actually did have a couple of other comments, and I got sidetracked for a moment there. So one of my questions was with regards to the town and improving new developments and whether or not there's going to be some kind of a regulation around carbon sequestration to a certain extent. So in creating green spaces that are part of the development or that are integrated into the development. And I'm not talking green spaces like parks necessarily, but more forest type space, as that does capture a lot more carbon for sequestration reasons than grass does. And so that's one of my things. I have a couple of others. So I know that I have brought up previously with regards to the active transportation plan that when it comes to facilities in the town of Aurora, there are certain areas that are very much underserviced. So if you're planning on partaking in part of town life, you do have to drive to certain locations. For instance, where I am, which is close to Bathurst and Henderson, it's very tough to get to a grocery store or a community center or any kind of shopping or soccer fields or anything else without driving. And that's just something that I know that that's the way that the town developed, but as you're planning out the town, it really would be very helpful to try and integrate those services in. And it would be even lovelier for those of us that are very much in these areas where we cannot access services without driving, for an attempt to create those spaces. One of the things that I saw being highlighted was trying to get families to use other modes of transportation instead of driving. While I'm in the middle of this, I'm noticing that everybody drives their kid to school these days. Very few, walking is almost gone, especially in Aurora. And it doesn't seem to matter what school you're at. There's very few families that are walking to school or walking home. And with that, you're finding that cars are idling a lot more. And I think this speaks to the anti-idling bylaw that was being presented at our last meeting, and that they're staying in parking lots, trying to find that space, trying to jockey for a space to pick up. And for some families, there really is no other choice, but for others, it's absolutely about convenience. And I think that there's something that's not being addressed, in that people feel that they can afford to run their car and they can afford to pay the fuel costs or whatever it is. And that to them, that's no skin off their back. But when it comes to the environment, all those choices add up. And I'm not sure how to create a broader change with something like that. And that also there's been a shift in our society to children not walking home on their own anymore. And I think that that is something that we have not addressed with regards to these plans, because it's often considers that children are walking home on their own, and that really doesn't happen as much as it used to. And there was only one other thing that I wanted to bring up, and there was the concept of a bike share in downtown Aurora, which I think is a really cool idea. However, I'm not sure what those bikes would be used to connect to. So if you're going to be getting on a bike, where are you going to be going? Especially because right now our downtown core is quite walkable. It's from Town Park over to Yonge Street, up and down Yonge Street, where there's a little bit of, there's some shops and restaurants, the library, Library Square. It is quite walkable. So I'm just curious what the purpose of the bike share would be. So where are you trying to connect to? Is it further down Yonge Street? Is it further across Wellington or up Yonge Street from that downtown area? I'm not sure. And then if that's the case, what kind of density are you planning on putting there for shops and services? Okay, I think that's all my comments now. Thank you.
Okay, lots of feedback in in that one, and things to think about to link into that active transportation lens for sure.
Yeah, and then just to kind of go on what Sarah was saying, this is a town of Aurora kind of project, but I'm assuming that York Region is going to be pulled in as well, because I think we've discussed before part of the active living circumstances where the bike path can't be put on Wellington and Yonge, because those are technically town of Aurora, York Region owned type. So, if you want to implement this plan to kind of say, okay, let's reduce carbon, bike paths are going to be an important part of that, but then those are some major streets that require them.
Okay, if I may, my name is Anka Mihail. I'm the manager of engineering for the town of Aurora. I will try to respond to a few of the questions and comments that Sarah put. I might not be able to answer to all of them, but I will do my best. So first of all, with active transportation. So our transportation master plan recommended that we look at creating an active transportation master plan townwide for Aurora. And we have a proposal included in the 2021 budget that council will look at now to hire a consultant and create an active transportation master plan for Aurora. So we are going to look at bike lanes. We're going to look at the walkways, sidewalk system. So we have a very good complete and comprehensive system to allow pedestrians and people to reach different points in Aurora without using a vehicle. Of course, we are going to work with the consultant and York Region to look at what we can do on regional roads. York Region has they have their own active transportation master plan, so we are going to draw from their experience and their master plan and input it in our future active transportation master plan. So we are hoping that council will approve this the funding for this master plan, and we are ready to start working on the active transportation master plan starting in 2021. Regarding the carbon sequestration and the planning principles, I know there is an ongoing green development plan for the town of Aurora, and I think that this will be addressed part of this green development this is ongoing in the planning division. So when we look at the future development, or everything that is green development is taking into account and incorporating in the planning principles going forward. I don't know what else, if there is something else that I understand. I know you mentioned it, Bathurst and Henderson, an area that, is difficult to be reached without, driving a car. As I said at the beginning, we are going to look at this part of the active transportation plan to have all areas in the town and make sure that, either, you can walk or you can bike, and you can reach everything, all the points in the town without using a car. Also, regarding the school, in 2013, Town of Aurora was the first municipality in York Region that implemented walk to school program. And we are working with York Region and we are working with school boards. So we look at what has to be done and how we can improve community in such a way that kids can walk safely to school. So either building a section of sidewalk that is missing, or looking at stop signs that have to be put to make, the kids travel to school more safer. So things like that. I don't know if I touch on everything that you raised, but.
I have one comment to make, if that's all right, just about your comments on sequestration. So how I mentioned earlier, like the federal government recently set their net zero target, and we're seeing like more and more trends of cities doing that. And it's interesting because, like, as you can see in this plan, it was hard enough trying to get to an 80% reduction, let alone to like a net zero reduction, right? But when folks set these net zero targets, they're not going to reduce emissions to zero. They're going to reduce emissions a certain amount and then use sequestration and offsets to get them the rest of the way. And it's a little bit of the Wild West right now with folks setting these targets because we don't know how much they plan to use offsets and sequestration. But what's definitely coming down like the pipe is a little bit of rules around that, right? For how, when you set these targets, how much you actually focus on reduction. And then, you know, next in line, you would focus on sequestration and offsets. And I've only seen one specific kind of set of rules the federal government had in their own operations has made some rules around this. So with their own buildings and transportation, they have this commitment to net zero, and they have to achieve a 90% reduction before they're allowed to then turn to offsets and sequestration, except for their military operations. And then it's just 50% because those things consume a lot of energy. And I don't think they can get jets down to, you know, like 90% reduction. But it's just kind of interesting because like, it's sort of this Wild West space right now. We certainly want, you know, lots of greening initiatives, but there's this hope that they will kind of easily help you meet these net zero targets. And I don't think that's really the case. The actual amount of carbon taken from the atmosphere from those things, there's a bit of uncertainty with that. And then I think there's also a bit of expectation that it's more than it actually amounts to.
Yeah, well, and the other part is that I think about how, you know, we're still seeing new builds in Aurora where they have backyards against backyards with just a fence. And the backyards are so small that most homeowners are opting not to put trees in. And so those kinds of decisions are being made at the planning level, but then there's a trickle down effect of what happens when you don't have that space to put in the big maple tree or whatever else it is. And I know that the town is very effective with their boulevard tree program. In fact, I've sung its praises a number of times in a number of places. But there's just so much in terms of that structuring of how a development is built and what kind of rules the town can put into place in order to create change. And I think that change with regards to those developments that are going to continue to come to our town needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I have a question, if it's okay to jump in. So living in a neighborhood in Central Aurora where when I moved here in 1993, the average home in my area was probably 2,500 or 3,000 square feet. Now the norm in my neighborhood is 6,000 or 8,000 square feet. And we're seeing more and more of these very, very large homes being built. And the data in your document talked about how as the population grows, you don't expect to see the increase in emissions, I think it was, due to the controls that we put in. But if this trend continues, how is that going to affect your data? If the trend in town of replacing not even a 3,000 square foot home, but a 1,500 square foot home with a 6,000 square foot home. If we continue to see that, how's the impact there, and how do you plan to manage that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting piece, Janet, because our sort of business, I think you were talking about the business is planned, so it kind of keeps those emissions at not steady, but not a crazy incline because of things like improvements to the building code, as well as, you know, hopefully improvements to even just the fuel efficiency of vehicles. So some of those things that are beyond the action of the town, and the larger homes. Yeah, the footprint can be bigger. The energy use can be higher depending on the efficiency of the home. So I don't know that I have a good answer for how that sort of all plays out in terms of that trajectory. But I think if you're focused on sort of that retrofit of existing and the adoption of the green standard, that should hopefully mitigate some of those impacts within the housing residential sector.
Well, I look at our own situation, and for us to retrofit wouldn't be fruitful, because we know full well when the day comes when we sell that they will tear our house down and replace it with something that's double to triple the size. And I think that that's probably the case of a number of these homes that are older if they are on a larger than average size lot. So I'm not sure how that would impact on the intake with that program.
May I make a couple of comments? There's, in that work study group that I attended, there seemed to be some very optimistic assumptions, which upon discussion, we realized that they weren't as didn't have the potential that we originally hoped, such as, for example, solar units being installed on the roofs of residential structures. We realized that they had to be, if they're going to be successful, they had to be time coordinated so that when someone was, for example, going to replace their shingles, that would be the time to install. And that the subsequent reinstallation of new shingles in 20 or 25 years would prove to be a problem, because the units in effect would have to be removed before the new shingles could be put on. So we realized there was kind of a reduction in our assumption. And I think that's applying to a lot of things, unfortunately. We talk about bike lanes and access by foot. The thing is, for half of the year, that's not an attractive option for a lot of people, because we have still, despite global warming, winters to deal with. I was hoping that the other aspect of Aurora becoming a leader in innovation, research, and development, I know there's been a couple of news stories in Aurora of people working on unique engines, motors for motorcycles, trucks, the like. Could Aurora not be encouraged to support, sponsor perhaps, research and development in the field of seasonal vehicles, lightweight seasonal vehicles, which would operate by electricity, but not be a full vehicle investment by homeowners, just a more agreeable way of getting one's children through school or getting to local work, using perhaps a bike path, but being enshrouded in a weather protective shell. In other words, when you look to other countries where they have bicycles that carry, business materials, that they have a bicycle up front, but they have a trailer behind. I mean, couldn't we develop something with a small electrical assist that would allow us to take advantage of bike paths in those inclement seasonal times? So I think Aurora, if we want to bridge that gap between 65 and 80%, we have to look beyond the limited assumptions we go into this program with. We have to look outside the box and encourage developers, entrepreneurs to pursue these options. And if Aurora wants to be the leader, I think we have to take that initiative. We have to encourage these people. I know the mayor's been on social media visiting a couple of these operations. One where somebody had been dealing with a motor, I think it worked on, was it electrolysis? I'm not sure of the mechanism involved, but it was basically electronic and combustion combination, dealing with hydrogen by stripping the water and recombining it in a motor. Did I miss the mechanics of that article? But it was a departure from the norm. It was innovative. And I was hoping that perhaps Aurora could give monetary advantage to entrepreneurs who are exploring these means of filling the voids, because we have big voids between 65 and 80% by 2050. And now the feds are looking to 100%, net zero. I think we need a encouragement, entrepreneurial encouragement factor to be built into our plan. Thank you.
Yeah, and Barry, I like the innovative thinking and sort of the local focus of that. I think that's really great. And, we've kind of identified at this point in the plan that there is a need to address that gap, and that there will be emerging technologies. We know technology is going to change between now and 2050, and that some of that can be integrated into that piece. It's just not really quantified at this point in time, right? To be able to say what the reduction is from innovation, because we don't know what the innovation is, but it certainly is a piece of bridging that gap.
So I was just wondering, one of the things that nobody's spoken to yet, and I appreciate the people who have taken the time to answer some of my questions, is the bike share idea and what those connections are supposed to look like if we're going to be implementing some kind of a bike share program in Aurora.
Yeah, Anka, the bike share comes out of the economic development strategy. It was identified as one of the solutions in there. I'm not sure, Sarah, if it got as far as sort of identifying specific connections, but that would be something for the town to kind of explore as part of the development. Anka, did you want to?
Absolutely no. I don't have information now, but it's something that definitely it's part of the plan's implementation, and we are going to look at this, and we are going to look even with a part of the active transportation master plan. We are going to address this bike share program and details of the program, but I don't have more information at this time.
Yeah, I just think that it's probably an unnecessary step. I think that people who are going to ride their bike are already riding their bikes, and people who probably aren't ready to do so would have to see a value add. And I'm not sure that our town has those spaces that you would want to connect with via bike if you don't already have one.
Definitely, yes, I hear and I understand what you're saying, and definitely we are going to look into it with our consultant, and if it's not something for Aurora, we are not going to pursue that, but we are going to look into that if it's possible or not.
Would it be something that you could look at it even at share with Newmarket or a regional level?
Yep,
Yeah,
definitely.
Which is what I was just trying to find where it was in the plan. And that's what we had identified, work with partner organizations in the region to explore the feasibility if it makes sense. So if it doesn't make sense, then that's, I guess, where you land. But it could be an opportunity for some connections. But, Sarah, I think you're saying it might not be worth.
Well, I think about the way that my sister lives in downtown Toronto, and she rides her bike to her job at City Hall. She gets on transit, and then she takes the transit down to the waterfront where she's going to meet up with a friend for dinner, and she gets a bike share there. And it makes sense because she's still connecting via bike. She still has her bike helmet with her and all the other things that she might need. But I'm just wondering, where are those connections? Because if we're not planning our town to have those connections, what's the point in putting in something like a bike share? Because where are you going to be going to? What's the connection point? Because if it's just to go downtown and then get on a bike, I feel like you just go downtown and you walk in Aurora anyways. So I think that that's something to be factored in. Because I do know that there is a cost with bike share. And I think that maybe that cost would be better suited to bike lanes for the people who are already riding bikes and creating that infrastructure.
Okay.
Laura, I think you have a comment.
Yeah, I was just
I'm gonna let you say your comment, and then we're gonna move this along. I'm just cognizant of the time.
Sure. Just a one comment, having lived in London, which has a phenomenal bike plan, Forest Bikes, I would say at least a quarter of all the usages was to drive it to your local tube station. So in our case, going to the GO station. So to have an active place where you can drop and ride your bike just to get on the GO train, I think people would use it for that.
Thank you, Laura. So I'm just gonna call a vote to just all in favor. Is anyone opposed? Perfect. So we're gonna move on to 6. Oh, Thank you, Sarah and Natalie. I'm going to move on to number 6.2, memorandum from the manager of recreation regarding community service pricing and policy and ability to pay CAC update. We are going to have a presentation by Lisa Warath, manager of recreation. Lisa, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. As Balpreet said, I'm the manager of recreation for the town of Aurora. My name is Lisa, and I'm just going to pull up my presentation here. So just give me a moment. Can everybody see that?
No.
You can't see it?
No.
No, I think you need to share your screen, Lisa.
Oh, I do. I'm sorry. You're right.
That's okay.
I did not share my screen. Just a moment. Let me go back here. There we go. Now can you see it? Can you see that?
Still,
No, we can't see it.
Oh,
Still
not
nothing.
quite sure what the problem is.
Lisa, it's Samantha. I have your presentation. I can share my screen for you. I'm gonna ask like if Samantha could do it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think it's because of our remote. Anyway, we're on a funny system when we're at home and we're on our town computers. So anyway, about a year ago, we engaged some consultants from a company called Monteith Brown, and they do a lot of work in this area in terms of recreation, community pricing, ability to pay subsidy type programs. So we hired them to have a look at this whole area for us because our last policies are over 10 years old and they were a little bit outdated and they were difficult for staff to even follow and adhere to because they were so out of date. So we had asked them to look at really two separate policies. One is a program and services pricing policy, and the other is an ability to pay or an access policy, which provides for individuals who don't have the means to pay for a recreation program or service. So the one thing I do want to say is that this applies only to the programs and services that the town is directly delivering. This does not apply to a program where you may, if you sign up your child with the soccer club, you pay a fee. They set their own fees and we're not sure, we don't get involved in how they do that. So I just wanted to make that clear that this only applies to the fees, the programs and services that the town directly delivers. So as I said, two separate policies, one around how we price our programs and services, and one around subsidy for residents who cannot afford to pay the fee that we've set for that program or service. And these types of policies and procedures are important to have because they lend themselves to the overall health of our communities. They help in terms of pricing. Fees need to be transparent. They need to be consistent. And we need to understand the true cost of our programs. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but so all of this work helps staff to understand that and to, as I said, better serve the community so that our pricing is fair and it's transparent, and that there's a methodology going forward, and so that we can be fiscally responsible when we're programming and pricing programs and services. So to date, we have undertaken a number of steps. We're actually sort of in the home stretch of this project. We did recruit a reference committee, and we do have a couple of members on our reference committee are on this group, so they've heard this before. But what we did was we met with them a couple times just to vet the various drafts of the policies and the concepts, and did it make sense? Did it make sense for our particular community in Aurora? Did it seem fair? Were there any glaring omissions? That type of thing. So we got really good feedback from our reference committee on these draft policies. There was also a review taken of policies and procedures in surrounding municipalities, along with a bit of a benchmarking for pricing. So we took some random programs and we benchmarked. So, a learn to swim lesson. How much does it cost here? How much does it cost in Newmarket, Stouffville? We wanted to get that benchmark as well, because that's important when we're pricing our programs. We've also done some focus groups. So we did some focus groups with some of our clients who have used our subsidy program. So those who didn't have the means to pay full fee for programs, we did some focus groups with them just to, again, go through the policy, to hear about what they need to be able to participate in our programs, and how they would like to see a new process or policy work. So again, excellent feedback from those groups. And we're in the development of the 2 draft policies. So the one on the pricing and the one on the subsidy or access, some background documents and a calculation worksheet. So I believe a number of these were added to your agenda, and you've got these documents. The community survey actually just closed, so we are just going through the results of that survey. And again, it was general feedback on how people felt about how pricing should be undertaken, the equity of who pays what for which program, that type of thing. Those were the sorts of questions that were asked. So we've got some survey results that we're just analyzing now. That survey just closed on Monday. So the background document was helpful. Again, it outlines the purpose and the content of this whole project. It talks about the town's role in delivering recreation community services. And I mean, I think it's well known that a healthy community overall has a strong recreation program and a strong offering of community services and that and those types of things. It talks about a rationale for doing this whole project, and I already mentioned that a little bit, just in terms of fairness, transparency, fiscal responsibility, those types of things. Again, we reviewed local policies and procedures and practices to see what some of the surrounding municipalities were doing around how they're pricing policies and what their prices are. Of course, a review of our demographic and social economic trends, because it does influence how we price our programs or and what our subsidy might be. And as I mentioned, the rates and fees benchmarking is what I was talking about when I said we looked at the surrounding municipalities to see what they were charging for like programs and how they were setting their fees for the various swim lessons and fitness memberships and all those types of things. So the draft pricing policy, I believe, again, that was part of your package, but it does include, again, key concepts such as transparency in local government, excuse me, by having a methodology in terms of setting fees. And understanding, again, our true costs. That was really important to us. We did not have a good handle on that over the past couple of years, and the cost to provide them, and reasonable levels of cost recovery. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And it defined our indirect and direct costs. It categorized programs and service types. And then it set cost recovery targets. So what that all means is we went through, and again, we defined indirect and direct costs. So we would take, for instance, for a learn to swim, I keep using that learn to swim example, we have an instructor cost. So we pay an instructor to teach kids that lesson. There could be some equipment costs like flutter boards or some equipment they need in the pool. And we sort of had those costs. But what this project has allowed us to do is really understand our full costs. So the consultants took a deep dive into our financials, and they were able to figure out our facility operating costs as it relates to a swim lesson for a child. So, you know, what does it cost to run that pool, heat that pool, chlorinate that pool? So we now have a better sense of the cost related to that swim lesson. And we also went so far as to try and determine the administrative costs related to that. So although we are paying a part-time swim instructor, we also have full-time staff who administer the whole Learn to Swim program, and we're now able to apply a portion of their salary to the cost of running the swim lesson. So we have a much better understanding now of what our true costs are in terms of operating our programs, which is great, as I said, from a a fiscal responsibility standpoint. It helps staff we're more able to budget, do our operating budgets, that type of thing, and we're able to make sure that we're in line with surrounding municipalities. That's still important as well. So the other thing the pricing policy does is it categorizes certain program types and how much cost recovery we can expect to get back, because there are very few programs and services offered by the town in community services where we're getting 100% of all of our direct and indirect costs. Those are really high level types of programs, things like private swim lessons, very specialized programs. Those are the ones where we would expect to recoup 75 to 100% of the cost. The majority of our programs are subsidized to some level, and they're subsidized in categories, and typically what's used is sort of a zero, so they're free, to a 25% cost recovery, a 25 to 50% cost recovery, and a 50 to 75% cost recovery. So as I said, all of our programs have now been categorized into one of those four categories. So things like Learn to Swim, that's categorized at a really low recovery rate. And the reason for that is that it's generally accepted that learning how to swim is an important life skill. So it's determined that there should be, it's not realistic to expect that people can pay 100% of the cost of the swim lesson, because once we apply administrative costs and facility costs, a half-hour swim lesson ends up in the category of about $70 or $80, and yet we're only charging 25% of that to the general public. And again, the rationale for that is swim lessons are a life skill, and it's generally accepted that they should be made available to everybody. And then we get up and it's also generally accepted that you want some no-fee programs, you want some free programs. Again, it's crucial to the overall health of your community, and we're fortunate in Aurora. We have a lot of that. We have a great trail and park system. We have a whole bunch of fantastic free special events. We're often able to get sponsorships to offer free leisure skates or free leisure swims. We have our public courts, our tennis courts are available for use for free. So we are fortunate that we do have a good menu of no charge programs. Our youth drop-in room is also free for people to use the loft at the leisure complex. And then, as I said, the various program categories go up from low fee, no fee to introductory. Those are sort of, introductory programs and services in a wide variety of areas. So they could be arts and craft programs, science, technology, engineering, math programs, general interest, and all of these programs are geared to all ages. So the subsidy, the targeted level of cost recovery isn't geared to any age group. It's more about the benefit of the program to that individual. So in the introductory level, we look at we're looking at a targeted cost recovery of 25 to 50%. And then we get a little bit higher, we get into the value added. So those are things like aquatic leadership training, fitness memberships. We would expect to recover a higher percentage of our costs there, around 50 to 75%. And then we get into the premium and commercial, and that's more along the lines of our room rentals, personal training in the fitness center, some very specialized day camps and that type of thing. That's where you would be expecting to recover closer to 100% of the cost of the program. So that's where the draft pricing policy sits right now. It is going in front of council, hopefully at the beginning of January. So the next policy is the what we're calling the access policy. And so that's a policy that addresses individuals who cannot afford the set fee for a program. So once we've set the fee based on our direct and indirect costs and these levels of recovery, there are still individuals who cannot afford to pay the fee. And it's important that no one is denied access to recreation because they don't have the financial means. So our current policy is, again, a little bit outdated. It doesn't have the most sustainable funding source and not a great means test. So we really needed to formalize this policy. So it talks about determining a cost, an average amount of money that the average person would spend on recreation programs and services with the town. So we did that research, and what we found was the average participant spends about $250 a year. Some of them spend much more, some of them only spend $100, but so that was the average. So the general practice is you determine that amount of money, and then you allocate those funds to individuals who qualify for the subsidy program. And in our community, and there's different targets and things that we're working towards in terms of determining how many people we would like to reach, would like to have participate. We haven't done a great job up to now promoting our subsidy program, and nor was it 100% funded or subsidized. This new policy recommends that it be 100% subsidized up to that $250 amount. The current policy talks about a cost sharing where the town pays 56% and the participant pays 44%. But for some people, that 44% is still a barrier. They still can't afford a program because they have to pay 44% of whatever it is. So that's our current program. And there's the policy talks about measures and targets and the means test. So we're still working with working on what the means test will be. Traditionally, it's always been LICO. LICO is the low income cutoff. It's very low. And it's very black and white, and it's generally organizations are moving away from using LICO because it is so restrictive. It's very low, and people who are at the LICO line still can't have, like, even there are people above the LICO line that still can't afford recreation because LICO is so low. So what most municipalities and the region of York is using is LIM, which is the low income measure. The low income measure is a little bit more generous, so to speak, in terms of determining someone's eligibility. It doesn't just look at their household income, it looks at the income and their household expenses. So there's a little bit more flexibility. It's just a little bit more realistic when you're looking at a family who's trying to live on a very low income. So we're still determining what those what that means test will be in order to qualify for the policy and to qualify for that potentially $250 pool of funds that a family or an individual could use to participate in recreation throughout the year. And the other thing we've done is looked at, and we've always done this, but we work with a lot of other funding agencies. So there are a lot of other agencies out there that are providing funds for recreation and community services, the region certainly being one of them. Jumpstart, we work very closely with. And we've been fortunate that we've been able to get a number of corporate sponsors who have directed their funding toward recreation and community service type programs. So Desjardins is a big sponsor, and they've sponsored, well, pre-COVID, they were sponsoring free swim and skate days every day, every month, one free swim day, one free skate day. So we're looking at all of our options when it comes to subsidy. We know that the municipality cannot be everything to all people, and that we do have fiscal restraints, and we do have an operating budget. So it's a difficult balance because you don't want to exclude anyone from participating, yet there is, we're accountable to the taxpayers at the end of the day, and there is a budget that we need to adhere to. So that's where the access policy sits right now. Those are the highlights of the access policy. And the other piece that the consultants did for us, and I talked about this a little bit, was a calculation guide. And this is a guide that's mainly for staff use. So this is the guide that helps us understand what a program costs. So when we're looking at developing a new program, and we develop new programs all the time, we offer probably 1,000 programs throughout the year. And in this guide, as I said, it helps us input what we know is our staff costs, our equipment costs, and sort of any of those other known direct costs. And then it's calculated what our facility cost might be, and they've done that per facility. So they've gone through and figured out what our cost might be for the various facilities where we offer programs and run programs and services. And then again, that administrative cost of full-time staff supporting these programs. There's a calculation for that as well. So as staff, when we're trying to figure out what to charge for a new program, we plug all that in, we get to our true cost. And then, as I mentioned, that cost is quite high. We go back to those 4 buckets of subsidy, those 0 to 25, 25 to 50. We see where the program we're working on fits in. And then we adjust the price based on that. We're also looking at a couple of other things when we're adjusting prices and trying to come up with a fair price for a program. And we're looking at, again, what the surrounding municipalities are charging, and also what we think the market can bear. Recreation programs and services is it's becoming more and more of a competitive market, certainly in some areas. And it's like any, program or commodity. It's you have to, it's supply and demand sort of thing. So there's a number of those factors definitely weigh into what we would end up pricing a program. And there have been times where we've gone through the exercise and a program is going to cost, we're going to have to charge so much to a participant to recoup what we think we should be recouping, and we don't think it'll fly in the community, or we don't think there'll be a demand, and so we don't offer it. And that has happened to us, not too often. We like to try it anyway. We also don't like to compete with the private sector. So those really high-end, more expensive programs, you would see those offered by the private sector anyway. So where we're getting into some, again, those high-price specialty programs, that's not really our mandate in terms of community recreation. We tend to stick to those introductory, beginner level type of programs. So that guide has been a really excellent tool for staff, and we'll continue. And so that's a tool we're going to use on a regular basis, like really in our day-to-day work, because it helps us understand the true costs, and it helps provide rationale to how much we charge for a program or service. So that was a big part of this project, was getting that guide, that tool done for staff. So the next steps of this project are that we're finalizing the recommendations. We're looking at the survey results, and we intend to present it to council at the beginning of January. There will be no budget impacts to the 2021 budget, but there will be some impacts to the 22 budget around supporting the access policy. We don't anticipate any major budget impacts around the pricing, because what we can see happening already is some of our programs are a little bit overpriced, some of them are underpriced, and so the underpriced ones will go up incrementally. The overpriced ones will stay where they are till they sort of catch up to market rates. So we don't expect any major impact in terms of the operating budget, in terms of getting these programs in line. Anything that is identified as being severely underpriced and needs to come up, we want to do that on we need to phase that in. We can't just go and double the cost of a children's basketball program in 1 year. We know that won't be received well by the community, but we do need to get it up to where it needs to be eventually. And yeah, as I said, we are presenting to council, so any budget impacts will be seen in 2022. There likely will need to be updates to the 2022 fees and charges bylaw. But we do expect that this work will be able to guide us for the next 7 to 10 years. We know that we'll need to make tweaks, certainly, with those facility costs that have been calculated. Facility costs go up every year. So although they've determined a percentage for us for the next couple of years, we know that we're going to need to add a little bit every year to keep that facility cost in line with what it actually is. But we're quite happy to have this tool really provide some clarity for us and some defensible background for us to be able to talk about how we price programs and to make sure that they're equitable and fair, and that we're recouping the expenses that we need to recoup in terms of operating our facilities and full-time staff support and that type of thing. So that is where we're at with this project. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lisa. Can I have a mover and a seconder to put this item on the floor for discussion, please? Laura, mover, seconder, please. Barry, great. Does the committee have any questions or comments?
I had just one comment, thank you. In reading all of the information, Lisa, I was surprised to see that we would still give a discount for 3 or more children in a family. Mm-hmm. I think that my personal view would be that the money that is used for that would be better allocated to the income level testing, to redirect it more to low income parents than potentially targeting middle and upper class parents who can afford it. I think it's an old school proxy for low income testing. So if that could be just given some thought.
No, I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Sarah?
Can I just start off with, this is one of the best presentations I think we've heard so far in terms of aligning values and programs delivery. So I was so thrilled to hear that you had reached out to the low income stakeholders group to consult with them, as well as other groups that really, I would like to commend you on some very, very impressive work.
Oh, thank you.
Second of all, I really appreciate that instead of going with a LICO cutoff, you're thinking of going with the LIM cutoff. I think that especially in Aurora, there's a lot of people who are paying very high rents, whether just because of the community that we live in. And I think that's a really important measure. And then I had one question, which was regards to the $250 per family. So that could create a disconnect if you have multiple children as to how many children could access services. And I'm just wondering if that might be per child or if that might be per family, or how you're planning on sorting that out.
So it is per individual. So I'll just double check and
Okay.
make sure that that's how it's defined in the policy. It should be per individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great to hear.
Yeah.
And I really commend you for making the decision that swimming is considered more of a life skill. I've always said that my kids have swimming lessons whether they like it or not, because it's a safety skill. And soccer and hockey or whatever else, that's fun. And it's important in terms of physical activity, but it is not in the same category as swimming lessons. So I really appreciate that the town has taken that into account when they're doing their pricing and they're doing their cost recovery analysis. So thank you so much. I'm very, very impressed by this.
Thank you.
If there's no other comments, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Mrs. Worth. Now, I'm aware of the subsidization levels of the programs because we did the due diligence with all the departments in the Finance Advisory Committee a couple of years ago. Now you mentioned about the life skill. Can you talk about the other criteria that staff looks at with regards to the subsidy levels that we offer certain programs, like perhaps health benefits might be criteria? Are there other criteria that are in the guide that you refer to?
Yeah, there are. I mean, certainly, as you said, there's the health. There is, I mean, youth programs are typically highly subsidized because there is a population of youth that are at risk. So if we are offering free or low cost youth programs, the idea is that they'll be more inclined to participate in the program if it's affordable. I hate to use the phrase of like keeping youth off the street. We used to hear that all the time, but that is sort of the motivation behind it. It's to keep youth out of the justice system. It's to keep them healthy. Youth, as you know, are very vulnerable to mental health issues and a lot of pressures in general. So youth programs are typically highly subsidized. So yeah, there's a lot. Certainly introductory, beginner level, again, life skills. So cooking classes, we offer a lot of cooking classes. Cooking classes are deemed to be, not necessarily a life-saving skill, but it's a good skill to have. Financial management, again, for youth. So those life skills, and there's a whole variety of factors of things that go in. Physical activity, very important, but not necessarily on that low fee, no fee spectrum. It would be more so in the middle. And certainly as you get up into, if you're even in a sport, as you're progressing up to those elite levels, you can expect to pay more, even with the town or not. I mean, elite sport is not something we offer as a program and service anyway. But again, that's where you would expect to pay a little bit more. It's where the benefit to society becomes less and less is when the price goes up, to sort of put it in general terms.
Great, thank you very much, Lisa.
Okay, is there any further comments? Okay, so all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries. And we're going to go to our last agenda item. Number 7, informational items. This was an item that we deferred from our last meeting. And this is a CAC 20-004 pedestrian grade separated crosswalks and future priority crossings within Barrie-Go rail corridor. May I have a mover and a seconder to place this item on the floor for discussion? Laura and Janet. Is there a staff that would like to speak to this item?
Hi.
Hi, Michael.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Michael Batt. I'm the transportation analyst. So this report was prepared in response to a June 2020 notice of motion. The key objective of this report is to prioritize the 8 potential pedestrian crossing located along the railway corridor. These crossings were identified in the 2011 Trails Master Plan. The report also reviewed the different crossing options for Cousin Drive. The town received a letter from Metrolinx, and they will only consider grade separated crossing, so either underpass or overpass, because of safety related concern. The report also provides a cost estimation for each crossing, including construction costs, cost to retain a professional engineering firm to complete the environmental assessment and the detailed design. That's the overview of the report. Is there any questions or any comment that I can answer or address?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
I just scanned through it lately. It's focusing on pedestrians. Is it including bicycle and assisted access vehicles like electric chairs? Or is it strictly pedestrians, foot traffic?
I believe it will be pedestrian and bicycle, and it will be AODA compliances. So it will be able to accommodate electric wheelchairs.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Wow, Michael, you silenced the group here.
I think everyone's just tired.
Okay, so is there no further feedback to Michael about this? Okay, so then I'm going to ask for a vote. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, that carries. So that is our last agenda item for tonight. So I guess, Samantha, if there's nothing else that you need to add, I'm going to ask for an adjournment.
Through you, Madam Chair, nothing from me.
Okay, perfect. Oh, Councillor Kim, did you have a question? Okay. So may I have a motion to adjourn? Sarah, and seconded by Laura. All in favor? Great, that carries. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.